Jordan, it's nice to see you. It's been a long
I'm
time.
back.
It's been a long time since we've done one. When we've done one of these, you know?
I know.
Unfortunate
Um,
for really.
what's that?
It's unfortunate for everybody, really.
I don't know. I think it could be fortunate for everybody.
I don't know. The Schnee set, man, I gotta tell you, I've stopped at the one in Reno twice, and that's the only one I've ever been in. That's a sweet store, man.
Well, that's Shields.
Oh, Shields. No, that's not
Shields, yeah.
Shields.
Schnee's is in the
Fuck.
Bozeman.
That's right. That's right. I got it all mixed up.
Shields is a big store. Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about Shields because I liked it.
Yeah. They have a lot of stuff. I
Yeah.
don't love going in there though.
Well, I can understand that, but what
It's
I'm
like
saying is like,
Fud Central.
well, of course it is. But I went right to I needed 257 Roberts ammo, and then I went right to it, and it was there, buddy. And so
Yeah.
that is not the typical experience when you're looking for um
They
crazy.
have a lot of stuff in general, and their selection is pretty good. Um, Probably better than anybody else locally. Their
It's like
prices are pretty good too.
it's like what Dick's Sporting Goods is supposed to be. That's what Shields is.
Yeah, I don't know. Shields it's weird. It's like an alternate Walmart almost.
But you mean like you get the people watching aspect of Walmart?
No, like just they have like you walk in and there's like a fish tank and there's an
Oh,
escalator and there's a Ferris wheel and then there's like guns and clothes and toys and it's just there's a kind of a weird array of stuff in there.
it's an incredible carnival, is what it is. That you can.
It's yeah.
It's a really um I'm sure you noticed the sweet 1995 version of a TV behind my head. This
I
is
can like hear it turn on. Like I know the noise that TV makes when you turn it on. Like the spring of the button, the like
absolutely.
bong, the tube comes on. I
And
know it.
then there's like a little bit of static, and then there's like the line that runs through the middle, and it opens up the whole picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is what
Yeah.
happens, kids, when you live in a van down by the river. You know what I mean? So you'll have plenty of time to live in a van down by the river. Now, I
Yeah.
live.
Van that's like cool though now.
I know. Yeah, it is. It's like
Van life is cool.
it's actually really fucking expensive to live in a van down by the river now. Like it's obnoxiously expensive. Some of that shit's hundreds of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, man.
Yeah,
It's brutal.
quite literally.
It's brutal. But yeah, I live in a motorhome right now because it's fun and it's cheap until I figure out what I'm doing.
You figure out where you're gonna live.
Till the next stop, we'll see. I'll be in Salt Lake this coming weekend. I'm going over for the Western Hunt Expo, walk around and stuff, and then I'm gonna go up to Bozeman for a few days, pal around and see what's going on. You know.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
I'm not doing anything.
Well, well, that bring what? How did your last few chucker hunts go?
They were good.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, this was just a really good year. I think every hunt was good for the most part. Um, that are just yeah, there's tons of birds. You can find birds anywhere, so it's great. You could go out for a short run for just a little bit and guarantee that you're going to find birds somewhere. So that's I hope we have a year that's even like a little bit close. I guess like it's just hard to express how the bird density was this year. So if we could get another year that's even close to as good as this one was, I'll be very happy
You
next
said
year.
that last spring. I remember when we were hunting. You said that last spring had a lot to do with that because the weather was good for like all the clutches and everything.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not a biologist by any mean, but we had just a kind of a lot of late precipitation, and not a bunch of hail or anything. Hail is not tiny birds' friends. Um, it's like asteroids for them. But yeah, they just kind of a good mild, prolonged wet spring, which is kind of uncharacteristic of the most arid state in the lower 48.
Yeah, well, that's good. Did you ever go back? Did you ever go back out to that one spot that we went to? Where we?
I didn't know.
No.
I hunted that twice this year, and that was it.
Gotcha. I was curious if you ever went back because I didn't. I certainly did not expect to see that many birds in one day. I mean, obviously we did. You only killed one, but just the immense amount of birds that we saw, that was fucking incredible, dude.
Yeah, late season it can be kind of hard sometimes. When it gets cold, they get kind of huddled up together, and I mean those birds were pretty twitchy, so that just makes it really hard to get close to a covey when the coveys are all like 40 plus birds, and you know they're not gonna hold really for a dog that well.
Sure.
But still cool to see them, I guess, up there.
That
But
was awesome.
I'm surprised that gets hunted up there, but everything gets hunted. So everything you think wouldn't get hunted, somebody will find their way in there.
For sure. It's not an easy walk, that's for sure. So you wouldn't expect very many people to go up there, but
no.
Yeah.
It's a little steep.
It is that for sure, but it was fun. It was honestly, truth be told, it was my favorite day of hunting of 2024 without a doubt in my mind. So
yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, I don't think it was it was cool. I don't know what my favorite day would be. Met a lot of good. We did Montana, and that was really fun, and had a lot of good. And I feel like my favorite hunts are always when it's just me and the dogs, just because, or it's usually just me and one dog, so I take one at a time, for the most part, anyway. And I don't know. The favorite ones are like when you see a dog kind of like put something together that you haven't seen them do before. I guess that's my favorite. Might not be like your highest number days. But when you see like the light bulb turn on for them with something new, it's always just really cool. Like the last day that I hunted of the season, which was like 2 days before it closed, I think. It was super, super windy. And the birds were like, Matilda would go on point, and the birds, if the wind was right, she would smell them from really far away, and they were running. And I'd watch her like tear way out sideways and run around and try to get in front of them. And she did that a bunch of times where she like ran around them and cut them off between me and her. And it was just really cool to watch. And there's a few times like I know she would go on point, and then I know she could see the birds running on the ground, because I could tell by her head was like shooting back and forth, but she wouldn't rip into them. She would like literally go around them and try to get in front of them and go back on point. And I watched her do that like 5 times. It was super cool.
That makes me fall in love with her even more. I love Matilda.
She was a pain in the ass last year, so she was really good this year though. I shot a lot of birds over her this year. Awesome. And she was not a pain in the ass this year at all, which is cool.
That is good. Well, that's mature. She's what, 3 now?
Yeah.
3? Yeah.
3, yeah. Charlie will be 2 pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, it's maturity, I guess. I don't know. I'm looking forward to eventually training a bird dog and going through that whole process. So I don't know when that'll be, but it'll definitely. I don't know. I'm so smitten by Matilda that like all I can have in my mind is that I want an American Brittany. You know what I mean? So
yeah, she's just a really cool dog. She's generally easy. I mean, there's just, all dogs are different, I think. Like her and Charlie are obviously extremely different. But I don't know, you just kind of, you say like go through the training and stuff. I'm definitely not a good dog trainer. I just hunt them a lot and hope they kind of figure it out, show them a lot of birds. And then they just, hopefully the birds kind of teach them what they can and can't get away with. And I think if you have a dog that wants to, I don't know, get birds killed, they kind of will figure stuff out. So I'm sure really good trainers could get to an end product or whatever that might be, or a, faster. But I just I don't know. It's not for me.
Yeah, well, you do it the way you like.
Endless planting of birds in fields and stuff. Like my dogs will point a bird in a field and you can walk up and shoot it, but it's just so different than hunting with birds that won't hold, or when the wind's not great or sending's not great, or where they learn to look for birds, just all that stuff. It's like, so you're not walking them into birds, and how they handle, and all that jazz. Like Charlie handles a lot easier this year than he has before, because he could be kind of a handful.
Young Charles runs big.
Yeah, 800-yard plus dog. That's just how he is. He's just like that, which I like. It's fun. I wanted a dog like that, so you don't get a big ass English setter if you don't want to have a little bit of anxiety, I guess, in your life as to where they are. Matilda's she's not like that at all. I think the furthest she was on point this year was like 300 yards or something.
Yeah.
Unlike Charlie.
Piece of land,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and you see out here, you'd be like, when you're like, how far is that? And I'm like, well, I don't remember what it was. Like, I don't know, 200 something yards or something Charlie was at. So, I don't know.
I mean, it's difficult to tell maybe for everybody, but definitely for me growing up in the East, because we can always look at a tree, and like start to make a guesstimate and walk it out, and like don't have that chance when you're in the Nevada desert, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if Charlie goes like 2 ridges over and the GPS loses him, and you're like, he was last at, 580 yards, and it just gives you a little question mark on the GPS. Try to get to the top of the hill to pick him up again.
Yeah. Now we don't know.
Yeah. No, it was a good year. That was a tangent, but it was a really good year.
No, I'm glad you went on a tangent. It was it was fun. It was one of those things that, obviously we went on 1 day long hunt and then a shorter hunt, and it was just, I just enjoyed the shit out of it. And I was like, man, I would love to do more of this. So it was a really great experience for me. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that it was good minus the cramps, but
that was my own negligence. That was me not taking care of myself the way that I was supposed to. So
you're not the first, and you won't be the last person to cramp on a chucker hunt.
Well, it was one of those things where like, I know better. I've done enough, and I've done enough traveling to hunt. I've done enough walking up big hills that I know how to take care of myself, and I just did not do that. So so I had a bad time when I was coming down the hill.
Yes. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, yeah. I heard, maybe you knew this already. I was watching a Lane Norton video the other day about different liquids and their ability to hydrate you. And he said that not fully skimmed, partially skimmed milk was like the most hydrating of this study. So it was like partially skimmed milk, and then it was like some kind of electrolyte replacement with carbohydrate, and then like water, coffee, tea, all that stuff was the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's just about like all the it's the osmotic effect, essentially. So milk is going to have just way more everything, sugar, fat, but I also will never drink milk while I'm doing something.
Oh God, no.
Physical.
I just thought it was hilarious. I mean, it all makes sense, like when you break down the constituent parts of it, but it's just funny to hear, like, yeah, milk's going to hydrate you the best. So
yeah,
and that's like back east, like growing up in like agricultural Pennsylvania, like people you go into most homes and you have milk with your supper. It's just,
Really?
yeah, it's just what people do. People drink milk with their supper.
Yeah. I can't say that. I feel like that's like I don't know. I feel like that was more prevalent like in the 60s, like
Well,
'70s,
dude, when you
like
go to Mifflin County,
with
Pennsylvania,
smoking. Like milk at dinner and smoking go together.
well, you're walking back in time when you go to Mifflin County, Pennsylvania, buddy. So it's funny, but it still happens. Like my buddy Neil, I know every meal Neil has a glass of milk. Every meal. He's
Yeah.
also one or two generations removed from being Amish. If so, that should probably say something.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I don't foresee having pre-workout
Milk.
milk.
I think it's a really good way to make yourself yak, dude.
Like in the summer, yeah, just barf,
Yeah, dude. It really is.
drink a bunch of milk and go for a long run in the heat.
Don't do that. Speaking of long runs, and that's not necessarily just runs, but long, easy endurance work is what we have planned to talk about today. And kind of talking to people like why they should do it and maybe how to go about doing it, I think is the big goal of what we want to accomplish. So I thought maybe we'd start with kind of what some of the basic adaptations are to low intensity exercise and why it's important. And then like why extending that out and doing it over a long period of time and staying easy as you do it over a long period of time would be a good direction to go after that, you know?
Yeah.
How's that grab you?
Sounds good. I mean, I'm a fan of long duration stuff, obviously. So, I mean, I think that from the adaptation standpoint, well, man, there's a lot there. Do you mean like from a cardiovascular standpoint?
I mean, central and peripheral cardiovascular. I mean, you know, the first thing that is it increases your cardiac output, right? I know that you and I are recounting things that we know, but for everybody else, that it's going to increase your stroke volume, which is how much blood that your heart pumps out with each beat, and then your cardiac output is the total of that over the course of a minute. And so, lower intensity work, well, at the right intensity, increases how much your left ventricle stretches because blood pools in it, and that stretch makes it able to contract harder, and then you pump out more blood with each beat. So that's so like stuff like walking through all those adaptations.
Yeah. And the caveat to that being something that I think it was in one of your like coaching notes or something recently, you know, that it has to be typically like some type of light load cyclic movement.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
Because your peripheral blood pressure can't be high
Right.
for it to have the intended effect. And also you know, why we're so big on the rates are, I was talking about this with my friend, the rates are, it's somewhat horseshoes and hand grenades, like exactly where your zones for things are. But realistically, the higher your heart rate is, the less filling time you're going to have for your ventricle and the less propensity to get that like preload is going to be. So if your rate's really fast, you're not going to have the filling and the stretch, and you're not going to have as much to eject essentially. To some degree, everybody's different. If you're really fit, that number is higher.
Right.
You know, it's going to be different for everybody, but that's a big part of why those two things, you know, like why can't I do CrossFit as my zone 2 or whatever, or weightlifting as my zone 2? That's why. And then why we're big on people that are like, you know, pushing it kind of hard. It's like, well, you might not, you might get more by doing less, by kind of dropping your rate a little bit. And that zone 2 stuff, in my opinion, for our purpose, it should be a pace you can do for hours and hours and hours and hours.
Absolutely.
Like when people are like, oh, 30 minutes or whatever, like it should be a pace you can do for like 4+ hours.
Absolutely. And
Um,
a good gauge of that is like, would you need to eat to support your activity level? And if you would need to eat, I mean, of course you're going to get to a point where like, okay, but if you could do it without eating, you know that you're likely at the close to the right pace.
yeah. And that's like a whole nother can of worms, right?
So we don't
Like
need to get into it
you
right now.
could still be in your zone too, and you still might only be able to do like a couple hours before you sort of crash out, which, again, that's just going to come with time and like how effective your, intramuscular triglycerides and, then just your regular, fat that you pack around, like how, how efficient your system's lipolysis is really.
Which the duration of your low intensity exercise is going to improve that efficiency. Like that's one of
For
the
sure.
reasons to do
Yeah.
shit for so long. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another reason why you kind of, when you're going towards some of the lower rate stuff, that's a big part of why, because the, um, talking about the adaptation. So, I mean, we've talked about the cardiac portion. We've talked about that a bunch. There's so much information on it out there. Those are kind of the broad strokes of it, right?
Let's before we move on, let's cover the other end of it. With like, if all of that pressure is going somewhere, there has to be something to do with that pressure, and so that's why the capillary beds in your muscles, you increase them, and because otherwise there would be no point in increasing your cardiac output. So you have to manage the pressure at both ends. So that force increases the capillary beds in your muscles. And so then you have better transfer of oxygen and nutrients and all that kind of stuff. So it enhances all of the other processes that we're about to discuss. So,
Right. And then what comes after that is like you're talking about with the, exchange of, and again, I'm not a physiologist or there's way better people to listen to, but the broad strokes are, it's when we talk about capacity, those are the things that you're going to be able to improve. Because I think if you've done something long enough where you just get that, you get pretty huge systemic fatigue, and that's going to be a different spot for everybody else, but you have to be able to mobilize, fuel essentially. Right. And so where you're mobilizing that from, it can be a pretty big array of sources and duration dependent and all these things. But point being, like, to mobilize it, it has to basically go into your bloodstream essentially. So the more of all that, the peripheral adaptation you have, same thing. It's just going to lend more to facilitating the use of systemic energy, essentially being able to move it. And then, you have the metabolic side of that, kind of what we talked about a little bit, like being able to free that energy up, how fast you can do it.
yeah.
But having a highway to send it to also.
And then you need the stuff to actually do something with it when you mobilize it. And that's, or otherwise you wouldn't. And that's why another thing that happens, it increases the amount and size and quality of the mitochondria in your muscles, which do all of the energetic work that we need them to do once we mobilize energy from different places.
Yeah. And I think an important thing on that topic too is just the when we're talking about like these long duration stuff, like even if you go and do active stuff all year, but let's say you're going to switch to running for the spring, like there's also the aspect of tissue tolerance that you're going to have to build. And so even if you're in really great cardiovascular shape, like there's still going to be some curve of tissue tolerance that you're going to have to work with, and be smart about, to not just have a stupid injury or something.
Yeah. I mean, I that's one of the reasons I think you and I have talked about it before, is like I like for hunters that can run to run, because the adaptation and tissue tolerance and that you get from being able to do that over long periods of time only helps when you're going to hike and ruck and do all the things that you might do on a hunt. But I think that that's where one of the reasons that people get so messed up from running and they're like, well, I can't run, is because they start running too hard, too fast, and they don't have the tissue tolerance to deal with it, or they go for too long of a duration too quickly, and they just were not prepared to run for that long. And so it's like one of those things where you almost have to bracket it as you build up your running volume to improve at that, doing something else to increase the amount of time that you're training at a low intensity.
Yeah. I think too, you have to address like mechanics issues and stuff along the way.
For sure.
Because you're going to find that on the longer duration stuff, your mechanics are going to want to break down, and it can be pretty mentally taxing to have whatever cues or whatever you might have to be able to keep your cadence or your gait or whatever it is that you have to work on, like your time on the ground. You have to pay attention to that stuff. You can't just, run it into the ground and then be like, well, I don't know why I have this ankle pain or whatever it might be. You have to really address that stuff as it comes up, because probably there will be something to come up. I mean, you do something for long enough, you're going to have something be the first thing that is kind of giving you grief.
Absolutely.
At least with most people I've dealt with, so it's not abnormal. It's just something you have to address, I think.
It's going to happen. And every like running physical therapist that I know that's good, that works with runners, is like, you're going to deal with this and you're going to have to figure out a way past it. And it's partially like, it's part of the deal. It's going to happen, but also don't be an idiot and make sure that your volumes are appropriate and your intensities are appropriate. And, sometimes that requires knowledge, or it requires outsourcing that knowledge to a coach and somebody that's done it, so yeah.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And sometimes it's kind of a question like, is this something you can run through? And sometimes it is, and then other times it's not. And every person's going to be different with what that is. Like, I will always get on my left side some like medial,
Sure.
like posterior aspect medial, kind of fatigue and like a little bit of pain, mostly fatigue, in my left side for whatever reason.
And like or like in your, where?
No, my ankle.
In your ankle. Gotcha.
Yeah. Just my left foot just tends to overpronate a bit. And it just takes a little while for that strength to get built up. So, I'll start noticing it around like 7 miles or so. And then I kind of just leave it there, and then, it'll get better. And then once I get up to running like 10 miles or so, it by that point, the way I build up, I usually don't have it anymore, but it's like something I can count on every year when I start running. I'd be better served if I ran all year, but I'm not going to do that. So,
it's also nice to have seasons of things, man. And that's one of the reasons that, besides the fact of, it helps to layer different qualities of fitness throughout the year. But that's another reason that, our programming is laid out the way that it is for backcountry ready and DIY, is because it's just nice to have a season of things and transition into different aspects of what you're doing too. Psychologically, it seems beneficial.
Yeah. For me, it's more so just like, I can't chucker hunt twice a week and run.
Run, for sure.
I'll be just too torn down.
You got to set your priorities,
So if I'm getting, let's say on the low end, anywhere from like 3 hours of cardio a week, 3 to 8 hours a week during the season, like I'm not going to put more into that. But it's just it's just the tissue tolerance side for the running.
Yeah. And chuckers live in pretty gnarly fucking places. So I feel like you're getting enough conditioning work just on to maintain what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the conditioning part is there, or at least like for the long duration stuff is there. Sometimes it can be a little intense, I guess, depending on how you kind of go about your hunt. But yeah, I don't need to try to get to 10 or 12 hours of that work a week. For me, I don't need to. Some other people might. I don't.
It's a rare day that a lot of people do, but I think one of the things that might be useful for us to do, so we're talked a little bit about, all right, so we want the central adaptations, and we're talking about your heart. We're talking about your vascular system, your capillaries, things like that. I mean, more acutely, like some of the capillary stuff happens pretty fast, like within the first 2 months, and then you just maintain it. But like, and then we talked about mobilizing energy from different places. So from your inner muscle stores to other aspects of different places from your body, being able to mobilize that, use it efficiently. And that's what we're training our bodies to do. So I think maybe the next step for people, because the question that they might have in their mind is like, great, okay, so what counts as long duration? Because a lot of people go and do 30 to 45-minute gym workouts, and that's the shit that they've been doing because that's what they've been told they were supposed to do, and that's what's going to get them ready. We know that that's not the case. So where would you draw the line? And this is what we mean by long duration.
I think it's different for everybody. I think it depends on what your fitness level is. And really where I like, if you're relatively fit, I would say, anything, I would say like over 90 minutes on the low end, I guess. I would like to see like 2 hours or more for like what I would say like has pretty long rip. But again, I think it's really different for everybody. And I think it's sort of, if you're going at a reasonable pace, to where you are not, you're in your kind of zone 1 or zone 2 zone, you kind of can just go until you're like super fatigued and stop, end it there. And whatever that time is what I would be like, that's your limit that you're going to add, 5% or whatever to, because you can still keep going when you're super fatigued. And then that's a whole different animal, I think. But you can, if you're going slow enough, you could just keep going, and you might feel like you can't, but you can. But I think for all intents and purposes, it's like, it's not going to feel really hard, but you're just going to feel like your legs are lead, and you're just, or your pace slows way down. And you are at a similar heart rate, but you're just, you can't keep going at the same pace. And it's a pretty significant drop off. And I would say that is kind of where I would kind of use your set point for people. Personally, that's what I would say, because you're going to just get to this point where either your heart rate's going to run away or your output's going to drop way down, because not everybody is going to be able to really like have that ability to free up all their energy sources that they need until you kind of push into that. It's the reason why like you could be super fit, but you're not going to go run an ultra marathon, right? Because you don't have all the stuff that you need to. But a big one is just like how fast you can mobilize energy, because you can't really take in my opinion, like the really elite athletes and stuff, where they're taking in like a bunch of carbohydrates and stuff, but like they're still mobilizing a lot of fat to make energy for those events. Like they have to be able to. Absolutely. And even then, like the gastric side of things, like it's just hard to absorb enough carbohydrates without gastric problems. Yeah. So, I mean, like they have to be able to mobilize energy. And I think the way you get better at that is just by doing the longer end stuff. And, so like I said, in a really fit person, I would say 90 plus minutes. But that doesn't mean if like for you, it's 30 minutes and you're like, dude, I'm so tired and I'm so fatigued, then it's 30 minutes for you. And you can build it up. The people that can do 2, 3, 8, 10 hours, like they didn't just jump straight to doing that. They all started somewhere,
Absolutely. It's a progression. And I think that's a good point to touch on. Is we know, especially we'll say if you're on the lower end of the fitness scale, these adaptations start to take place at 30 minutes, so if you have 30 minutes or if 30 minutes is tough for you right now, that's fine, because that's where it all kinds of, the good things all kind of start to happen.
And I honestly, that's great. Like if you're getting like a really big benefit from 30 minutes of cardio, like that's so awesome.
Yeah.
Versus like having to go out and be like, well, I have to run for 3 hours today. Like sometimes that can be a little daunting when it's like hunting season or something. You're going to go hike for 4 hours. You don't even think about it. It's no big deal because it's enjoyable.
Yeah.
But then at some point as your fitness improves, like 30 minutes of cardio is still great. I'll never have any qualms with that. But as your fitness improves and you really want to get better, it's like you're going to have to start stretching that duration. The same way that as you get stronger, like you're going to have to start using more weight. Or if you want to keep getting stronger. If you want to maintain your fitness and you're doing 30 minutes and you're happy with that, no issues. But if you're like, man, I'd really like to be able to just go super long, there's just going to be a point where you just have to stretch it.
Well, sure. And even so, like the longer term stuff, like, well, just to recap, we're mostly, the longer duration stuff is improving how efficiently you mobilize and utilize energy. And you have to get to a point where your body has to be forced to do that. And that's what we want from the adaptation.
Yeah.
But even so, like doing that stuff, if you want to improve your fitness for long duration stuff, for sure, but it'll also help your performance on shorter duration stuff. So it's an important thing to do for, you know what I mean? Like even that. So.
Yeah. And, you also are forced to, like we talked about a little bit, you really have to, mind your mechanics, because if you just move like total shit when you're fatigued, same thing, like you might be able to suffer through a certain amount, but you're not going to be able to do it like all year long. You might have like one or, few like training blocks if you don't move well or something, but it's not a sustainable thing. So you really have to force yourself to move well when you're tired.
And we're talking about muscles and the heart and peripheral vasculature and all that kind of stuff. But, it really comes back to, you're also creating context for your brain, and your brain's main goal. Like I'm all right. I'll also preface this by saying, like, I'm not a neurologist. I'm not a physiologist. I have a degree in exercise science, a master's degree in exercise science. But what I do understand is that we're always creating context for our brain. And so if you move like shit when you get tired, and you always move like shit when you get tired, you train your brain to move like shit when you get tired. And that will end up having repercussions for you.
Yeah. And the really interesting part is, kind of, like if you get really tired and you want to like be like hunched over like a shrimp and like going super slow, sometimes that can actually take more energy than being upright and having like less contact time on the ground, because you're not going to be braking as much, like if we're talking about running, right? So it can actually make you more tired, and that's like a horrible loop to be in. So you're like, oh, when I'm tired, I do this, and then after I start doing this, I'm 10 minutes away from being done, kind of thing. And I think an important part too is like, if you're doing some of this longer duration stuff, like, and you have to stop and walk to like get your stuff together, even for like 5 minutes, like if you're going on a 3-hour thing, if you walk for 5 minutes or longer, if you walk for an hour of it, I mean, you have to know when you have to kind of reel it in, and it depends on what you're trying to do. And so if you're like, I really need to push my capacity, and you're just really having a hard time, but nothing's wrong, like you're not hurt, you're just like tired or you're mentally fatigued, but you can keep going. It's like, that's what you need to know, when and where to kind of reel it in. Like, you're not in a race, right? If you're in a race, fine, go for it. But if you have to like stop and reel it in and like take a drink of water or whatever, you don't get a medal for like not stopping or not, you know what I mean? Like, I guess it depends on your intent of the session. So if you're like, I'm going to get 3 hours in, regardless, it's like, well, if you have that mindset and you need to walk or something, like, good for you.
Yeah, we do it. Yeah.
You know, you don't have to be like, um, running an 8-minute mile the entire time, you know?
Oh, and most of the time you shouldn't. And that's, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say one of the best ways to progress all this is like saying run walk intervals are awesome. You know what I mean? Like you don't need to, I think people see this and it's just beat into their head what running might be. And especially if you're going to try to build capacity, you're trying to build tissue tolerance, and you want to do things for a long time, there are going to be periods that you have to decrease your intensity and walk. It's part of the deal, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Like, can you obviously get to the point where you can run for a long duration without having to walk? For absolutely you can, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with walking and actually building that into the plan as you start to increase everything.
Yeah. I don't think like there's any, I don't think that's a failure if you
Absolutely not. Absolutely
stop
not.
and walk or something. Like, yeah, I think it's kind of viewed as that sometimes with people, like they feel like they have to, you know, run or they have to do a certain pace or something. And,
It doesn't matter. Especially if you think
no,
about what we're doing, right? Like we're training to hunt, and the outcome is to improve our fitness for hunting. It's not necessarily sure, you'll see benefits from your running fitness and you'll improve as a runner if that's what you choose to do. But we're not runners. We're running to improve our fitness for something that we love to do and for the rest of our lives. And it's not necessarily like, so putting these like arbitrary benchmarks on it doesn't really help you psychologically and doesn't help you continue to do things the best way that you can.
yeah, I think there's a few things there. I think one is if you want to put your own arbitrary benchmarks in based on like objective performance, I think that's good. If
Fine.
you're like, last time I was able to run for this long without stopping, and I want to try to run for, however many more minutes this week,
Absolutely.
whatever, or at a certain speed or whatever. And those are for you, because the reality is there's a lot of people that are going to be way faster than you, and there's a lot of people that are going to be way slower than you. And doesn't really matter, to me, I guess, anyway. And that being said, I personally like to hedge more toward, if you gave me a choice of all these things, because we have volume, we have intensity, and then we have kind of what I look at with like single session duration. And so if for our purposes, where if you're like, because people are going to go hunt for like a couple of days or whatever, like I think the single session duration is really important.
Absolutely.
The volume and stuff overall is important, and the intensity is really important. But if I were to say like, I'm going to put these other two aside, and focus on my like single session duration, obviously for the long sessions, like your volume or your intensity can't be crazy high, because you just won't be able to do it.
No.
There's pretty easy litmus test for that, right? Did you make it or not? But I think that's a good thing this time of year for people to be looking at. It seems early, I know, but I think when you're really able to start stretching that out, it can be pretty beneficial, for all the reasons we talked about. Another thing is it just takes time too. So the sooner you start in the year, I think the better off that you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have 2 90-minute sessions built into the program for this training phase. And, I put in the coaching notes, like if you can extend the second one of the week for longer, 2 potential 90 minutes. The first one, obviously, the one of the week is like, get as much in as you can. If you have 90 minutes, do it. But then the weekend session, like it says it's listed as 90 minutes, but if you have more, go and just mark it. Because getting that time, like, I think that's one of the things that, that we've done over the years that has really helped a lot of folks, is that allows them to go from day to day as we plan these long sessions, especially starting now and then through the summer, that otherwise, a shorter, harder workout wouldn't do for you.
Yeah. And that's not to say like you said, it doesn't have to be, the in the week ones, like whatever people have time for. And also if if you know that you are going to be kind of sore or something from your longer run, and you have to mix up your modalities, like you're going to ruck, or you're going to swim, or you're going to ride a bike or something, you're still going to get all those cardio benefits. You're not going to get the specific aspect of being on your feet, and you just have to be mindful of that tissue tolerance piece going forward. But you're still going to have benefit, from doing a different modality. And sometimes you might, depending, like you might need to, right? You might, if you're like, man, my long run, I want to, or whatever, it might be ruck or whatever, like I might be a little beat up after that. And I'm not going to, I don't really want to do another relatively long session of the same modality, because I feel like it's going to lead me down a bad road. And you can mix, like if you get really bored, the other thing is you can mix it all too, right?
Dude,
you could go ruck for an hour or whatever you want, and you could like finish up at home on your assault bike, or if you have one or whatever. You can mix it all up too,
I've absolutely done that for long sessions. I mean, I've done long runs, I've done long rucks, I've hiked, I've biked, but there have been times where it's like, well, I'll ruck for an hour, then I'm going to ride my bike for an hour, and then we'll see where I'm at after that and what I want to do. But it's absolutely, especially because, we talked about efficiency, and we talked about efficiency during running, and especially with something like rucking, where a lot of people make the mistake of just using too much weight all the time.
Yeah.
And you start to create all of these bad habits. First, there's the tissue tolerance aspect. It's not as pronounced as with running, but it's still there. And then also, you're carrying too much weight for a long duration. You train yourself into really bad habits. So you start to hunch, you start to breathe really poorly. And then that all just translates into really bad habits when you have heavier weight on your back, And so really thinking about the recovery aspect, like you're talking about, but like, how can I be efficient right now and still get the work in that I need to get in?
Yeah. And I think that's going to be a little bit of a different answer for everybody, just depending on where you're at. But I certainly think that is probably something that is a little underutilized. It's like break it into different things, because like I said, you're still going to get that. You're still going to have a super long duration. But if you're like, dude, I can't run for an hour right now, it's like, well, don't.
Yeah.
But if you want to run a little bit to start, greasing that groove, kind of like run a little bit. And then, like you said, you could do run walk intervals, but even then, if that's just too much time on your feet, like then go hop on the rower. And if you're like, dude, I'm bored of the rower, my back's lit up, like then go jump on the bike. I think that's a pretty underutilized. I mean, like I don't do that a ton. But I think if you're really wanting to build the aerobic standpoint, I think it's a super good tool. And it also, it's just, it can be a little easier to recover from when you do those tubes, but you're going from like running with all the eccentric force, and you're going to like a bike where you just have like pretty concentric, it's going to be easier to recover from that session, but you're still going to get a huge cardiovascular benefit from it. So
absolutely,
I think that's a really good tool for people to use,
especially this time of year. We're a good piece out from most hunting seasons, unless you're going to hunt spring bear, or you have like you're traveling to somewhere else in the world to hunt for hunting season. Most good planning works from general to specific. And so right now you can be far more general with your training. And then as you get into summer, like, you need to be spending time on your feet. You need to get on. It would be best case scenario if you got onto terrain and moved on terrain, if that's what you're going to be doing. But at this point in the year, it's like you just need to accrue the volume, and you need to start building up into having long sessions.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, those are some easy ways you can do it, to stack it into each other. And that's not to say like go run for an hour, like take a 4-hour break and then go run, go straight into whatever you're going to go to next. But like you're saying, just trying to accrue the volume in the session. And is something that I think is pretty important from now till
and
hunting
it's
season starts.
it's a progression too, right? Because like we talked about, if you look at, we'll just arbitrarily say, that 30 minutes is that point where you start to get fatigue. It's like, well, you're going to have to do a volume accrual across the week until you can start to build more volume into that session, right? Because the frequency of doing the training is going to improve your fitness more than hitting that 30-minute wall and then saying, well, I'm going to beat my head against the wall for another half an hour and do a bunch of sloppy shit and let my heart rate get too.
Right.
So sometimes you need to accrue before you can start to add in the length of the session.
Yeah. And then I think it depends on how far you're going to go, I guess, so if you're going to go run an ultra marathon, like then you go from that one long session a week to where that one long session a week starts to get a lot longer, and you have some other sessions that are kind of long as well, or you have more frequency. So I guess it like the theme kind of repeats, I guess. You're getting to like some type of threshold that you're aiming to get to where you can, train at a, whatever speed for whatever duration. And like you're saying, depending on where you're at, that might mean you need, a couple sessions a week. That might mean you need to start stretching your longer stuff. I think it just depends on where you're at.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But, and like the other thing, like you're not going to do every session. Let's say if you do have a couple a week, like you're saying, you're not going to do every single one until you're super fatigued.
Oh,
right?
God, no.
Like you're not going to, if you want to do one like that a week, I would say, and again, it depends on how far you're going to take it, right? Like super fatigued depends on, where you're at. But like, there's some times where I've like gone, and it's a rare thing because all the stars have to align with me having no other responsibilities for the day, which is not too common. But like if you're gonna go so long, that like you come home and like you're fucking torched, like you're done, you're not doing shit for the rest of the day. Probably not good to do multiple times a week, right?
Oh, no.
Like
you're not going to recover from it. You won't.
Like you're going to eat and like not move the rest of the day because you're just smoked.
Well,
so it's all balanced. But that's, again, we like to hedge people towards like Morpheus, because if you've done a lot of this and you have a feel for it, and you're like, well, I know that I won't be too sore tomorrow, or whatever it might be. Versus if you're just not so sure on that, and you're like, I had a pretty hard training session. You wake up and your HRV is like way lower. It's like, well, that's a pretty good indicator that, like it's, you can be relatively objective then from that point, even if you're like, oh, I don't feel too bad, I'm a little run down, but I'll bounce back. And then those are sometimes when people just kind of work themselves into a hole.
Absolutely.
Whereas if you have some data, you can be like, oh, good, my HRV is normal, a little bit of soreness here or whatever, I'll be mindful of X, Y, and Z and sally forth.
Yeah. And one of the things that helps with that is understanding, well, first planning, and then some understanding of the different function of a training session, right? So you're going to have the easiest way to say it is stimulatory sessions and then developmental sessions. So like what you just described would be a developmental session, like these super long kind of push to fit, not crush yourself, but push to fatigue kind of session. You're going to need that. But then you also need a stimulatory session that like will help you recover, but also works on the same adaptations at a lower cost to your body. And so, if you look at even how our current training week is laid out, our Monday session is relatively developmental with eustress training for strength. And then you have the options. I mean, you have the option to maybe have a developmental session on Tuesday, but knowing that most people aren't going to have the time for that, kind of a stimulatory aerobic session, then we have a rest. Then we have a stimulatory strength session, mostly a stimulatory conditioning session, and then a developmental session. And so you can usually get away with, depending on your fitness level, like 2 developmental sessions per week. And if you try to push it way farther than that, you're going to, and you look at those are different modalities, right? So if you tried to do 2 big pushes of the same thing in the week and you're not ready for it, you're really going to dig yourself into a hole.
Yeah. And I think 2 is like max for
Right.
most people that aren't like professional athletes.
For sure. Well, yeah.
Like, and again, we're talking like developmental sessions are like you're saying, like, I mean, your output is like pretty high in whatever, whether it's a strength session, like, or a aerobic session, or I don't feel that way as much with the conditioning piece, just because the duration of those is just generally short, and they're all they're all going to be high intensity, high speed, and because if they're not, you're doing something other than it's not. But they're going to be pretty short duration, and like you shouldn't be horribly sore, I don't think, from those things. You could be kind of maybe like a little bit fatigued, but just shouldn't be long enough that you're going to have like huge problems from it.
Right.
Versus when we're talking about, like, if you're talking about like a relatively long eustress session, that's like pretty heavy. You could be pretty sore after that. You could be relatively fatigued after that. And that's why there's obviously I like the midweek break for that. And then, a little bit of room between that and the next, like you're saying, kind of longer session, to sort of maximize your intent for those sessions, I think. Definitely. But yeah, like you said, it's something to think about, because 2 developmental sessions a week is like, that's max.
Yeah.
To me anyway.
I think I agree. And there's a different line for that for everybody. And that's one of the reasons why having someone that, well, first of all, using something like Morpheus is beneficial. And then also having like someone like you that, and me, but you look at a lot of our clients' training stuff throughout the week to say, well, here's where you might want to change that. And here's what developmental and stimulatory actually means for you, to help tailor that volume so that you are hitting things in the right way and that you're going to recover and move forward.
Yeah. And that being said, when we're talking about all this, sometimes if you're going to be doing things like that, like the longer duration stuff, you might have to drop a training day somewhere else.
Sometimes,
or you might have to have a really easy training day somewhere else, depending on how everything else is kind of fitting for you. Because if you're trying to do it all and like you're really sore, you're really fatigued, or if, let's say, if you're not using any kind of like data driven stuff and you're just kind of like don't feel so good, you really should. And honestly, you probably are better off then, which is hard to convince people, that maybe dropping your frequency or something, you might actually get more out of your training. When they can measure stuff, we can see it. So we know that we're not just wild ass guessing.
Yeah.
But you generally just kind of have like a idea if people are just depending on how they're doing.
Absolutely. And you can see it in, their pacing and from you and, their performance during sessions and over time. And you can start to see the fatigue build for sure. But I mean, and I'll say, like, just to lend credence to it, and also, for, I guess we'll call it, relatability's sake, is like, I'm fucking meaty. Like, I don't want to do that. And there have been times where it's like, I've pushed myself to the brink of like, I have to cut that day, because if I don't, I'm going to put myself in the trash can. And so it's something that you just have to do and you have to be mindful of. And like, this session's going to be easy. I'll tell you this past deload week, sincerely, is the best I've ever done with a down week in my entire life, with like the way that I approached it mentally and where I put my head and like making things feel the way that they need to feel. Cause I've been a strength and conditioning coach my entire career. I know how exercise adaptation works. I know how planning works. And it's still hard for me to listen to my own shit sometimes. You know what I mean? So It's like, dude, but it's so important to make sure that you're doing this the right way if you really want to progress over the long term.
I'm the opposite. Like a deload week, I love it. Like day off not going to train or do anything or something really easy. I love it.
Yeah. That's great. That lends you for success better.
I mean, I don't know. I think our personalities are just different. Like the way I view training and stuff is like, I'm just not like never been the strongest person in the room or whatever, and just like show up, do the shit, whatever. I'm out cruising on my long runs. Like, that weird guy on the side of the road that somebody saw like several hours ago is still running, like,
God, he's sweaty. Look how sweaty he is.
listening to some Disney soundtrack or something. But it is important one way or another to know when you need to pump the brakes. And conversely, if you're on the other end of the spectrum, it's nice to have some parameters to know when you can push it. And I think some of those longer duration things, especially if you're going to mix modality, like just sometimes it's okay to see where the bottom is. If you're if you're not going to get hurt, you're not pounding yourself to death, you're just really tired. You can find the bottom on a echo bike or whatever, or a spin bike or something after doing kind of a long session, and kind of just see where that is for you. And sometimes you surprise yourself. It might be a lot further out than you think, or either way, you just kind of get an idea of where you're like, dude, that's my bottom.
Absolutely. You need the context. I mean, that's one of the things that, even from a lifting standpoint, like running the gym and stuff for so long, we used to base things more off RPE instead of RIR, reps in reserve, and just getting regular folks that have never done anything hard to understand what a 9 or a 10 actually feels like is difficult. And sometimes you just have to go there to realize what it is. And so you can base everything back off of that.
Yeah. I think there's some studies on that too, where people their RPE and what they think it is. And then they don't let them, I think they had some metric or some measure, and, their rate of perceived exertion was far lower than what they were actually capable of. So it's but again, like you said, yeah, I think it all that comes with training age too,
One of the tricks that I really like that I use with people when I'm working with them in person, and this is something that people can do for themselves, is to film it and to show them the discrepancy between their speed and what's going on in their brain. It's like, look how fucking fast that
bar moves super fast. You're fine. And that people don't like hearing that, really. I don't think wow, it felt so hard. And it's but you recruited enough stuff to move that really fine, So, and I agree. I'm a big proponent of, when I first started seriously lifting weights in my early 20s, squatting and deadlifting and stuff very regularly. The whole first thing I filmed everything,
Yeah.
You can see what a super grinding lift looks like, which is not good. But then you can also see when you see that pretty quick. You're that rep felt so hard, but my bar speed was fine. So that's an okay place to be. Everything form wise looks good. Bars moving fast, feels not so good, but it's okay. And so I agree that I think filming yourself is a really same thing. I think that's a good tool that we probably don't talk about enough.
For sure.
Honestly, but it's a super good tool.
It's a great tool. And I've just seen it. I've seen light bulbs come on in people's eyes. Just actually it moved that fast. Fuck yeah. Dude, I have to do it for myself sometimes. You know what I mean? Because it's you just feel slow or you just feel sluggish. And sometimes it's just that you need to warm up a little more. So your nervous system kicks in and you kind of, all the juices are flowing. But other times it's just you need that reinforcement that you're fine, or consequently, depending on the context, that
looks shit. I'm going to shut it down for the day.
Today that I gotta step back from this.
Yeah.
we need, I mean, all the different data points help. Like if you have Morpheus or something like that gives you some kind of recovery score, HRV score. I think some of them I don't know, but I trust Morpheus pretty well. And then filming it or having somebody watch you and just having the other inputs to put all the picture together to say, this is where I'm at right now,
Yeah. And I think it's helpful when we're using those things, it's not like they're the end all be all.
No, absolutely.
But it's like looking at a trend overall, and keeping track of stuff. And so like we keep track of what our volume is for X, Y, and Z. And so the end user, like you do need to get the most out of things, you do need to keep track of some things for yourself. Just because life happens and there's all sorts of things that can happen. And you want to try to steer the ship in a way that you're going to get the most out of your training sessions. And for some people, that means very different things for everybody. But I guess point being is that's all really important to take into account when you're looking at getting towards these developmental, like long sessions that are going to take a lot out of you. It's important to know, like, dang, I feel really fatigued. You're going to lift weights. Like, it doesn't feel so good. Like, film a rep, be like, man, maybe I went, I might have gone a little too hard on my long cardio session. And now my lifting session is like, going to suffer. It's like, well, maybe you need to move that to another day, or, maybe you need to drop the duration of your cardio session a little bit, just to make it all play together nicely to where you can keep moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, there is that balance and for sure. And sometimes it's based on priorities, and one of the things that we were, Chris and I were talking about this morning, a bunch of people at our gym are doing this high rocks competition, and I don't know. It's like you do a bunch of running and like cardio events and shit like that. And so it's like it takes you about an hour to an hour and a half. It's getting pretty popular. I don't know. But anyway.
And I thought of something like this.
I know. Chris's wife did it. And so now everybody at the gym is doing one, and they're all pretty excited about it. And so we talked about, people over prioritizing the wrong things to prepare for the thing that they're doing for. So for example, I'll give another personal example. I tend towards like, I want to try to get all my strength sessions in because I'm big and I'm strong and I'm good at lifting weights. And really the priority should shift to something else because I'm as strong now as I'll ever need to be to do the things that I want to do. And so sometimes putting that energy into the other session when your other fitness qualities are where they need to be is totally fine. And you might not get as much out of your strength session, but you also might not need to. Like, that's not to say to turn it totally into like a shit can waste of time, but also making sure that your priorities are set in the right place based on what you need fitness wise is important.
For sure. Yeah. And depending on what your goals are. Yeah, because certain things, like you said, if you're as strong as you need to be, man, you can friggin' dial your strength training back so much to make room for other stuff. If you just want to maintain what you have, like you could probably lift once a week, and like, granted, have a good session, but like, don't probably need a whole lot of frequency to maintain what you have, at least for like a couple month block. If you're really trying to like push something else and you want to save those eggs for another basket.
Yeah.
Depending on, we're all different.
You only have so many resources. And be that time and also, resources in your body. And so you have to allocate them to the best possible degree to get what you need. And some people need both. And if you're relatively new to training, you can kind of find a different balance. But if you're already really strong or you're already really aerobically fit and shift balance in the other direction is going to help you, then that would be the best thing to do. So.
Yeah. I was looking at this high rocks thing. It looks like CrossFit.
It is like CrossFit. But
it says
competition,
like 1,000-meter ski erg, 50-meter sled push, 50-meter sled pull, burpee broad jumps.
And you got to run in between each event.
1,000-meter rowing, 200-meter farmer's carry, 100-meter sandbag lunges, 100x wall balls. Yeah, and they're like, you run a mile and then you do one of those and then you run a mile and or something like that.
Yep, you got to run in between each one.
Run 1 kilometer.
That's what
1 kilometer, followed by 1 functional workout station repeated 8 times.
Yeah.
It's CrossFit with more
It's
running,
a lot like CrossFit, for sure it is.
but
But
it's called High Rocks and it's spelled
yeah, you
weird.
know what's funny,
So
dude?
it's
And I
snazzy.
made fun of steak. I made fun of Chris. Well, I didn't make fun of Chris, but I was like, I didn't know what High Rocks stood for, and it stands for Hybrid Rock Star. And I was like, that's fucking dumb. Yeah, yeah, that's dumb. But anyway, I'm excited that people are excited to do it, and that people are training hard to go do something. And
I mean, I wouldn't say, it's probably not very easy, but it's
no, it's
like,
hard. And
you would think like, oh man, CrossFit's like cornered the market on that, don't even bother. And then somebody's like, well, this is High Rocks and it's different because you run. And people
well,
are like,
and Chris is,
sign me up.
they're doing Chris's programming for it. So they're doing smart shit. So it's not like they're just going and doing High Rocks to prepare for High Rocks. It's just like what a lot of people don't understand is like most of the people that you see at the CrossFit games and that win the games aren't doing CrossFit. You know what I mean? They have a very layered approach to their fitness that's intelligently planned. So to go out and do the competition on game day, you have to train intelligently still, It's not for me. It's not for me, but
I mean, hats off to people want to do it. I have no qualms with anybody doing any kind of physical
absolutely not
thing
man.
that they want to do. I just am surprised that it's a very successful thing.
Oh, it's really growing. It's growing fast.
I just looked at the thing, like international
High Rocks. Yeah. Anyway, people are doing shit. They're pushing themselves, and I'm happy about that. And they're doing it in a smart way. So I'm glad we're doing it. But, yeah. And Chris is writing the programming, so it's good. It's working.
They'll be fine.
Yeah. Anything that we think that before we close out, like considerations for people that are going to get into doing the longer duration stuff. So just like thoughts of like, you should keep this in mind, anything like that.
So if you're getting into it, you're gonna get into it. I would say for sure get a heart rate monitor. Doesn't have to be the greatest one in the world, but get a chest strap heart rate monitor. Watches suck.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't know all of your stuff and you're all confused about it, like, there's a zillion calculators out there. There's a million ways to look at your max, but a thing that I like that's just so simple that you don't need a lot of knowledge to do, and there's a lot of information on how to do it online. It's like to do a drift test for your long duration stuff, because I think in general people have a propensity to like go harder than they should, or they're at higher rates than they should be to do anything really long, because it's gonna have to be slower than what you might think. So getting a heart rate monitor and kind of getting a handle on that is probably good. And then figuring out, I guess, like what you want from it is probably the most important thing. And that should kind of drive where you make those decisions. Like you're saying, if you're, do you have to work on getting a lot stronger too? Do you have to, it all kind of marries together. So if you're doing those really big sessions, but you're also like, well, I also want to put 100 pounds on my deadlift. It's like, well,
you got to make a choice.
You kind of have to make a choice. Not saying you can't train both things hard, but like,
you can.
It just depends on how many eggs you want to put in that basket and how kind of fast you want to get toward that goal. But, yeah, I think getting a decent heart rate monitor is good. And I don't know, I think that's probably the biggest one. You just kind of gotta, like I said, figure out what you want from it, and then start working from there and see what you think. I think, like we both talked about, the finding that kind of really notable fatigue point is helpful if you can do that without getting hurt. You can do that safely, that while you're still moving well. That'd be the first. If you get to a point you're not horribly fatigued, but you start moving really poorly, like that's your point. that's your, okay, I fall apart here. Like I can't, you're going to, and like I said, typically you're going to slow down, or like something is going to change, pretty drastically. Or your heart rate zings way up and you can't keep it down. But those two things aside, if you just get to that point where you're just super, lead-legged fatigued, safely, that can be a kind of a good place to know, sort of, when you're saying like, oh, how far can I go? How good a shape am I? Like, if you don't know, you've never done it. Like, I don't know either. Some people, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. Might be 20 minutes, might be 2 hours, but
Absolutely. Yeah. I think I'm on 100% with all of that. And I think those are the most important things. And I think it's also okay to consider that if you're going to go for longer than 90 minutes, it's okay to have some snacky snacks with you when you go, some carbohydrate type things, and it's not going to fuck up your ability to mobilize fat and train your body to do that. So, and having the carbohydrates and stuff with you can help your recovery after that session. So taking a few snacky snacks with you, if you're going for longer, if you're under 90 minutes, you should not need them. But if you're going for 90 minutes to 4 hours, having some kind of fuel with you is a good idea.
Yeah, it can help for sure.
And don't count on their calorie counts, because all of them are wrong. So just don't even worry about
sure.
it. Find something that feels good and works for you, So
yeah, I think sometimes it's like the mental aspect with stuff, honestly.
I agree. I don't.
The amount of calories like you can ingest is going to be so variable. So I would tell most people, like, do not go buy like the most, Gucci, like, ultra high calorie, powdered drink mix and like chug a shitload of it, because you might have like seriously not good time. If you're going to like take some gummy bears or something, the rest of the stuff, like, it's like exercise candy, but it's just sugar. Like, there's all these studies on what type of sugar and whatever, but you're just going for like a long run, you're not doing anything too crazy. I think like whatever, like you're saying, whatever you like, whatever works for you is good. If you want to drink it, that's cool. If you do use some of the drink mixes, like, I wouldn't recommend getting, unless you've used them before, some of the really high potency stuff. They're really trying to get a lot of calories in that stuff. So it's going to have a lot of carbohydrates in it. And what can happen is, you put that in your stomach, and, if it's got a lot of solute in it, you're actually going to draw water into your gut. And that translates to diarrhea down the road. I've never had that happen. I don't do a whole lot on the snacking kind of stuff. I'd like take a little bit of stuff, just mostly for my like mental, component. But if you're going to go do something, like, don't get like the Morton super high test shit and chug a liter of it on your run.
You're going to have a bad time.
Yeah. Just take it kind of easy. And see if it makes a difference for you. Some, depending on how fast you're going, if you're going slow enough, like you're saying, probably really shouldn't eat anything. But if you want to take it, it's certainly not going to hurt. The other thing was really, I would say, is a thing on that. So after you do some of these longer duration things, especially if you're like 2+ hours, it's kind of like a free for all in terms of like post-exercise carbohydrate consumption. You don't need that much to replace all of your stuff, but it is an important aspect of like the glycogen cycling, like depleting it and refilling it, and depleting it and refilling it, and be able to increase like your ability to store glycogen. But that being said too, if there's like something you like really like to eat, like for me, it's Hawaiian food. Dude, if I'm going to go eat like a bunch of carbs and stuff, I'm going to go do it like right after I run, and your body will, you don't need a bunch of insulin then to use all of those carbs.
Right.
If that's just a good, I don't know. It's a nice perk. Like you can
Absolutely
use that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's that wonderful window you get post long duration exercise where you can consume some carbohydrates and not have too big of a change or anything in your blood sugar. So, and replete your glycogen. But mostly for me, like I just really want to eat Hawaiian food, but I can't eat it every day of the week. So, if I'm going to eat it, it's going to be after that. Minimize my blood sugar, rocketing upward.
Oh, absolutely. It's Thai food for me, man. I hammer Thai food after long stuff, I love it. So,
and if people are, if you're wondering, like I said, you could like take your blood sugar after you do or something really long, and you could like eat something right after, like something crazy, and then take your blood sugar again, see what it is. Yeah. And be like, didn't go up.
How about that?
What's going on? And like I said, aside from dumping a ton of insulin to do it. So it's a handy tip if you want to, eat something that you maybe shouldn't always eat. You should do that for your long run. That's
your day. It's Albanese gummy bears and Thai food. That's right.
You're Albanese.
I'm an Albanese guy, man.
I'm Team Haribo.
You're gonna say
Haribo. I don't know how to say it.
I don't either, actually.
You know what my favorite is, honestly? I don't know if I had any when we went on our truck hunt, but the Lifesavers, those wintergreen mints. I've probably said this before because my obsession with those is like, that's my number one. If I'm gonna have like a sugary thing, that takes the cake for me.
That's interesting. I love gummy candy. If I'm doing it, it's gummy candy, man. That's what I'm in for.
Yeah. I don't think you can go wrong with like any gummy candy, honestly.
I did a long one the other day and had Sour Patch watermelons, which are just delightful.
Those are really good.
Yeah.
Those are really, really good. My kid and her cousin got like hooked on these post swimming. They go swim until they're like ready to collapse. And then like they're going to have like a hypoglycemic event. So they're going to get some kind of candy or something. They're called twin snakes.
Oh, dude.
Like one is sour, one is sweet.
Yeah. Delicious.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Twin snakes would be good. Gummy candy, though, if it's hot outside, I'm a little, gets like all gooey and stuff, It's like you're running and it's like 90 degrees outside and you're like sweating and you're like, I want to eat this. And then it's this like gummy bear that looks like it's been like turned into napalm in a plastic bag. You're like, damn it.
That is the drawback. I think I still eat them though. It's almost like you drink them and
just scrape them out with your teeth.
I'll
do anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we covered it. I think that's pretty good.
Probably covered some things that we didn't need to cover.
No, I think it was all pertinent.
But that's okay.
No, I think it was good. Yeah. Well, that's all, folks.
Yeah. Go outside for a long time.
Do it outside. Absolutely. Go outside. Absolutely. We'll end on that.